Hello, Christina, and welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I am great, and it is awesome to be here, Avish.
Well, thank you. I'm super excited about this. I was already, I'd already invited you on, was excited to have you on, and then I started doing research and learned more of your story. I'm like, oh, this is a lot of interesting stuff to chat about here. Before we get into all of the great content and all of your expertise, for people who don't know you, could you give us the sort of 1 minute who you are and what you do overview?
Sure, who I am, Christina Butler. I'm a recovering TV reporter and anchor. I say that in the nicest way possible. I did 20 years hard time, both anchoring and on the street out in the community, interviewing people, telling stories. I did that about 2 decades and realized that I liked teaching communication strategies better than actually using them on the fly. So I transitioned into the training and keynote world, and I've been doing this for about 10 years, specifically working with organizations that want their employees to be more clear, more concise, and confident in their communication.
Love it. And I want to get into all that, the clear, concise, confident, that's sort of your brand. But first, I have a question. You said 20 years on the news, and I watched your news clip video. And the thing that surprised me the most is I'm curious where you did your reporting because I was watching. I'm like, do you, do you have a southern accent in those videos, which I'm not hearing now?
I did report in Virginia for 2 years. It was Charlottesville, Virginia. It shouldn't have been too much of a Southern accent, but that was really a Mod Podge community.
Okay.
Nobody was really from Charlottesville who worked in news in Charlottesville, so some of that might have been picked up there. But
Gotcha. Okay.
so I was in.
It's
Yeah.
fine if you do. No judging here. Just
Mm-hmm. Flip
um,
into it.
so this podcast, and with my book and focus is usually around change and saying yes and to change. Which your
Mm-hmm.
topic is about helping people communicate, which on the surface seems like it's a little bit not the same. But the more I dug into it, there are a couple areas I think that it does. And the first for me, and I talk a lot about in my program, is mindset. And I was watching and reading some of your content. I realized that a lot of what you talk about, before you get into the specific communication tactics, is about like that inner
Mm-hmm.
confidence. And just wondering if you could just share a little bit about how that kind of ties into your message, like how you feel and your confidence into communicating effectively.
Sure. Well, I think what I learned very quickly in news is that you can't worry about being perfect. You have to be ready. So it's this idea of ready anyway, be ready anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're confident in what you're saying, it doesn't matter how practiced you are, how rehearsed you are, how perfect it sounds. It's how well you know that content that then comes out in the moment that you're able to communicate it clearly when you really know what you're talking about and believe in
So that's interesting. So it's very much. I totally get like the how much you know and knowing your stuff. Obviously, really important.
it.
Back in my presentation skills days, I used to talk about that. Like, the more you know yourself. Do you ever talk to
Yeah.
people who like are in situations? What happens in a situation when someone is talking about something they don't know much about, or they're asked a question they don't know anything about or enough about? What's kind of the approach you take then?
Oh, of course, frameworks. I love frameworks. Before we get into the frameworks, though, when you don't know, for example, I was working with an engineering group about 2 months ago, a local engineering group, and they're so scientific. Typically, I don't want to stereotype, but they want specific answers and strategies, and they want the data and they want the numbers that back it up. So they're asked for their opinion on something or their answer to a question from leadership. And if they can't prove it 100% on the spot, they say, I don't know. And that's it. Instead
Mm-hmm.
of taking that, I don't know yet. And here's what we do know. And here's what we're going to do with that information so that we can have that answer. So it's really getting into the idea of even when you don't know, how can you make that answer have some process to it and still offer substance?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm curious how you handle this because
Mm-hmm.
I say something similar. And we were talking about how we have a similar approach. Mine's around like change and improvisation. Yours around communication. But
Mm-hmm.
I would say the same thing. Like if you don't know the answer, say I don't know, and I will get back to you, and then make sure you do it. And I'm curious how you handle because I think some people are so ingrained in this. It seems so weak to them to say I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like
Mm-hmm.
they try to BS their way through an answer because, oh, saying I don't know. Whereas I tell people that saying I don't know actually builds confidence. But I'm curious, how do
Right.
you, or what do you do when you
But
encounter people who don't want to say I don't know?
it's really walking them through. And as you were saying that, I was thinking, again, so many parallels between how we speak in corporate America and what I did during my time in TV news. And there would be times where we'd be in an editorial meeting in the morning and they would say, okay, Christina, you're covering this school district's decision to fire this employee. Well, school districts aren't going to tell you anything about
Mm-hmm.
their employees, especially if it's a personnel matter. We know that. Yet I still have to come up with a minute and 20 seconds to report on about that topic. So what do? We do process storytelling. That's where if you watch the local news or national news or feature stories, you'll sometimes see the reporter and there's a shot of them walking in a building and they say, "We went to the da 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 da. We were told this." That's process storytelling. There's no story. We are giving no new information, but we are telling you how we're getting the information. So if you take that and you look at it in a corporate culture, when people are asked for something and, as you said, they don't have the answer, yes, I don't have that, and here's what we're doing to get it.
Mm-hmm.
So it adds that substance to it and it gives it that forward motion.
Yeah, I love that approach. I was just thinking as you're talking about that, that
Yeah.
really, as a when you were a newscaster, I mean, you basically had to be sort of a master of improvisation, right? Because you were getting these stories almost in real time, and
Yes.
then when you're out there interviewing people,
Yes.
I'm sure you could share lots of stories of unexpected and things you just had to sort of maintain your composure and work
Cameras
through.
catching on fire.
What caught on
Yes,
fire?
cameras catching on fire. It, cameras catching on fire while you're talking into them. It wasn't just even the stories and the content. It was the technical stuff a lot of times that you had to improvise with. What do you do when all your lights go down? What do you do when the back in the olden days and it was an actual tape that had your precious video on it? What do you do when the machine eats that? That's the
Mm-hmm.
type of improv and adaptability we had to do, as well as when the actual content and stories changed.
Well, that kind of goes into kind of jumping ahead a little bit. One of the stories I was going to ask you about later, but it seems a segue now is, and I think this was with the, and I'm just curious because in your demo video you sort of start this story and then it doesn't continue in the demo, so I'm curious for myself. Is I think it was during like Baltimore riots and you were like in your car and people were
Yes.
you were in the car and people were attacking the car and you said a great
Yes.
line, which is that you were terrified but you couldn't show that. So I'd love to get a little more
Right.
context about that story and kind of how that applies to the work you're doing.
Sure. It's funny. That's the story we're starting with because that was the day in my career in news where I said, I'm done. I'm done. I need an exit strategy from this career here. And the Baltimore riots, if you remember, there was a teen named Freddie Gray, and he was being transported to a police station. He was in the back of a police type van, and he died in the back of the van. And a lot of people were outraged. They thought it was police mistreatment, and Baltimore essentially erupted. So I was not working in the Baltimore market at the time. I was working in the Harrisburg, Pennsylvania market. Quick, hour and a half away.
Mm-hmm.
Enough overlap because the story was so big that it wasn't unheard of for crews in Harrisburg to go to Baltimore to cover that. But we showed up late, and you can't show up late to a riot. We show up late, and our assignment desk said, "Hey, we heard there's going to be some commotion in this area." So we went there. We drive our live truck there. It's myself and a photographer, not my normal daily photographer, who you develop in this. You can read each other's body language. You know exactly what to do. Not that photographer, one who I had only occasionally worked with. And we get sent to this site where apparently there was going to be commotion. And sure enough, we get there within 5 minutes of us being there in the middle of this empty, almost like a strip mall parking lot.
Mm-hmm.
Crowds, I mean, just people came from everywhere and they saw us. And here we are, a sitting duck wearing this labeled giant TV news van. And they quickly turned all of that anger and rage and just pent up frustration on our news truck. And that's when they started throwing stones. I remember somebody had a red moving dolly, and they were threatening to bash our van in with it. Police couldn't get to us, National Guard couldn't reach us. And in that moment, we still had to make the decision to get back to your point. How does this translate into what I do? Because hopefully most people aren't showing up to a riot in their everyday jobs.
Right.
But how that translates is that in that moment, we had to take that breath and say, we still need to get video here. We still need to tell this story because other people aren't here to witness it. So we still have a job to do. So we take a deep breath. First of all, make sure we're safe, and then immediately go into that work mode. And you take the key points, and that's what you do in the moment when you have to share it. So again, hopefully people aren't in riots, but they do have high stakes meetings where perhaps a big project is resting on their shoulders. And the way they present it to senior leadership means that project is going to go forward or not. And what do? They have to take that breath. They have to narrow down the 3 points, and they have to say them with confidence. And they can't stand up there shaking and nervous, even if you want to. It's about managing those nerves in that moment and still staying on target with your message.
That's a wild story, and I'm curious. When you say make sure you're safe, did you like drive away from that crowd before you started reporting, or were you reporting from inside the van while this was going on around you?
Fair question. And Hollywood does this thing where in movies where you see TV news crews, it's like they can jump out of their van and they're immediately live. And that's not really how it happens. Now there is technology that makes that a little easier, but at that point you still had to establish a signal. So what we were doing was set up to get the video at that point, not directly stream live. We knew we had to get out of that part. I mean, we were surrounded. Yeah. We knew we had to get out, but we couldn't even drive forward because there were people in front of us. Eventually, we were able to, clear a way out of that parking lot. And then we probably got about 2 blocks away. And that's when we said, okay, now we can set up and go live. But all that is minutes. We're not talking an hour to regroup yourself. You have producers saying, get on the air. Or you're doing a phoner while your photographer is getting out of that parking lot. So it's quick. It's really quick. And that's what's required of us in corporate America too. Be quick, even when it's stressful. Keep yourself together, project that confidence, still hit your main points.
Well, it's very impressive. And I'm curious, was it just like the pausing and taking a breath? Because I think for so many of us, like when I try to project myself in that situation, like you said, that was like the straw that broke the camel's back for you. Like, all right, then you're leaving that. I feel like for many of us, that moment would have been it. Like we would not even have bothered to like, all right, we're not like, I don't feel safe. I'm totally frazzled. I'm just not even going to bother getting this footage. We're just going to get the heck out of here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you kind of, was it just like pausing and taking a breath and saying, no, I need to do this? Or like, how do you kind of retrain your mind in that moment to stay in the moment?
Well, first of all, you have to care about it. You have to care about what you're doing. And you have to find a way to make what you're talking about. You have to feel connected to it in a way that overrides those nerves. And if we could take a sidetrack and talk about nerves, because that's what is at the heart of this, yes. Right? Like I was nervous. I was scared out of my mind. But it was that combination of staying on point and managing those nerves. And for me, and I certainly don't want to speak for everybody who has ever been in TV, but the way you learn to manage those nerves is by being in situations, putting yourself in those situations. So when we were taking that 2-block drive, and all that adrenaline is now like starting to really unfold in us, it was knowing, okay, scary things have happened to us before on site and we got through them. It's falling back on that. And it's knowing, okay, I felt like this before and I made it through. We've been scared before and we've been okay. Again, translation into corporate America is the more you put yourself in those situations where you're standing up in front of leadership, in front of the president and talking, in front of even your team if you're a manager, the more you do that, the more that muscle memory reminds you, you'll get through this. It's okay. It's okay. Take that breath. You'll get through this. So it's relying on that muscle memory that you'll be okay.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because one of the things that we were talking about that is similar in both of our contents is one of the things I talk about with improv and applied improv and dealing with change or leading is the importance of like just focusing on your one next step. Like, and you talk about this as well. It's not about like so many people are waiting to have the whole thing figured out, but like an improv, and I have a story in my book about this, about how this one time we all sort of knew the end point of this long improvisation, which made the whole improv terrible because just so
That's the point, right? Right.
yeah. And it's the uncertainty, but it's like kind of to your point, it's like if I'm a first day reporter and it's like, oh, here, get in the van and go to this riot scene, then there's a good chance I'm going to totally shut down. You don't jump in, but you start, like you said, day after day with the small stuff so that, for example, I mean, very different stakes. I've done improv for 30 years, and it's an art form that terrifies a lot of people to like get up and have to be funny with nothing prepared. And I'm like, at this point, like I can get on a stage in front of 1,000 people with nothing prepared and, call up a volunteer I've never met before, and I don't really feel nervous about it. But to your point, it's like, if not hundreds, if not thousands of performances, 30 years. So but day one, when I started the first time in my college improv group, it was, 20 people in the audience. It was very different situations. You build up to it.
Yes. Well, is that because I remember the first time, Avish, I think I saw you on stage. It was National Speakers Association Philadelphia event years ago, and you got up on stage and were doing these things, and I was like, he doesn't have any sort of script? Like he's just, how is he doing this so confidently? So is that your trick? I'm curious, what's similar or what's different about how we handle that, like scripts out the window situation? Okay, is that what you fall back on?
So what's my trick? Well, the thing with the that's a big question. So there's a
I mean, well, let me rephrase it. So in those moments, like when you don't know what's coming next, a lot of people that is terrifying for. That's terrifying. Even keynote speakers who do this professionally stand on stage. That idea of not knowing which way you may have to pivot. Like, how do you handle nerves in that situation?
So a couple
Am
ways.
I allowed to do this, by the way? Flip
well, you are 20 years. You can take the.
I'm genuinely curious, though.
We can take you out of the reporting. Can't take the reporting out of you, as it is.
I'm curious. I'm curious how you handle it in those moments.
So there's kind of two tracks to this question. One is in an improv comedy context, and in improv, because it is less important to come up with the right answer. Right? It's like you can just say anything. So in those contexts, you learn to. Trust your creativity in that I've done this enough that I know, and I think it might have been the exercise I did when you saw me, but it's like an expert game where I pretend to be the expert. Yeah. And so many people, and just for context, if you're listening, haven't seen it, it's basically I get a topic from the audience I know nothing about. I pretend to be the world's leading expert. They ask me questions, and I blurt. And then what I find is that most people, when playing a game like that, they'll try to think of a funny answer to the question.
Yes.
And what I learned is you just got to flow. And so I'll just go with whatever first idea pops in my mind and just start talking because I've trained my creativity. And it doesn't always work. And I think this goes to another point, is that realizing that once in a while it's not going to work, and that's not the end of the world. And the other thing is realizing that the more I can get out of my conscious mind, the better it'll be. So if I reach the end of my answer and it hasn't said anything funny, I'll just keep talking. Because by definition, I have to say something creative because I got nothing else to say. That's the improv comedy answer. The real world answer, the application answer is similar. It's just you do more evaluating as you go. So when I talk about step by step, it's like you say your first answer and then you're kind of paying attention to, is this working? And you are quickly, it's something I call act, analyze, adjust. You take an action, you see what happens, you make the next step. And I think that's where, and as I'm rambling now, I realize that's where people get into trouble though. Instead of like starting with a short answer and then pausing, like you said, pause, they'll just keep going and going and going and going. If you're trying to be random and creative, that's effective. If you're trying to connect and be intelligent, then people know, oh, you're just like, you don't know what you're saying. You're just rambling on.
Digging yourself out, trying to find something that makes sense. But what I love about what you said there is that you said you have to learn that if it doesn't work, it's not the end of the world. Like you have to, the way I said, you have to build confidence that you've gotten through scary situations or pressurized situations before. You've also failed. You've also fallen on your face. I've plenty of times early in my career did words not come out right when I was live on air, or the teleprompter went down. And early in my career, things like that would have shattered me. I mean, I just panicked. Yeah. By the end, it's like, all right, well, I know how to get through it. I know that that's not the end of the world. I know I have enough confidence in myself to know that I can handle that if it happens. So I like how you said that, because there's crossover there as well.
Yeah, and I think the other point I try to make is that not only is it not the end of the world, but sometimes those failures are the best moments or the greatest opportunity to learn and innovate. I just read
Mhm.
a quote from someone somewhere. It was like an internet comment. It wasn't like a famous person, but it was something to the long lines of you you learn more from a good failure than or from a bad
Yeah.
failure than a spectacular success. Like you don't learn anything when you succeed because you're like, oh, I did it, I'm
Right.
great, I just keep going. Um,
Mhm.
and there's so many things that you can learn when you pivot and innovate off of a failure. So, and it's funny,
Mhm.
I haven't done a lot of media appearances. It's certainly only like a handful, like two or three live
Yeah.
ones. But even as like so we're talking about familiarity. Even as a quote unquote master of improvisation,
Mhm.
I find it intimidating because it's like you're going on live on the morning show, and
Right.
you got 2 minutes
Yeah.
and this camera and this camera. I'm like, all right, and I'm looking over and the anchor sitting there is just like they're totally relaxed, they're chatting away. I'm like, why are we
That's
not
totally
mentally focused on the zone? We got to get ready here.
the open is playing and you're like, do I have a microphone on yet? Yeah, it's
But it's just,
it's
it is repetition and familiarity, and I think
uh-huh.
and not to get too
Yeah.
old manny on people, uh, it's I feel like the world progresses, and people are just looking more and more for hacks and shortcuts. Uh,
Hmm.
well, how can I just quickly have the confidence to speak great? It's like, well, yeah, we can give you the skills and techniques, but a
Right.
lot of it's repetition and practice, so you are comfortable in all those scenarios.
Hmm. Hmm.
So
And
how do
certainly
you?
trusting your colleagues. You have to trust them.
Oh, go ahead, go ahead. I think you were about to say something interesting. I want to hear it.
Just the other part I have to mention there is it's also having that trust in your colleagues. I gave the example, which is true. I mean, this really happens. It's 20 seconds before you're on and you're still clipping your mic on, and the audio person is screaming for a mic check. You have to trust that they're going to do their jobs well enough that
Mm-hmm.
that microphone's going to work. You have to trust when you're out on on a breaking news scene that your videographer is getting the shots that they know are going to work as well. So it's really that trusting your team too, which again
Yes.
does translate into professionals and roles and clients I work with. They have to at some point say, "I've done enough with this. I need to let the rest of my team step in." So there's some of that as well, trusting your
Well,
team.
well, now we're going reel off the plan and we're improvising. Let me throw an idea out to you that I've talked
Of
about when
course.
it comes to improv, um,
Mm-hmm.
and see how this translates to what you just said about trusting your colleagues. So,
Yeah.
my weird applied improv background really started almost 30 years ago when I was running an improv group, and then I read Seven Habits of Highly Effective People by Covey,
Mm-hmm.
and he's got the book broken up is that the first three habits are independence, like you and yourself, and the next
Mm-hmm.
three are interdependence, which is you and other people. And I thought about
Yeah.
the improv kind and like a light bulb went off in my head. I was like, oh, there's your skills, and then there's the interaction.
Mm-hmm.
And so I came up with the idea that the reason I can go out and improvise with a volunteer in a keynote that has never done improv before, and I can do something on stage,
Yeah.
is I have 100% trust in myself that if they totally screw it up, I'm going to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I 100% agree. You got to trust your colleagues and let it go. I think so many leaders, managers, and people um, micromanage and don't trust their people because
Mm-hmm.
deep down they're sort of afraid of how messed up they're going to be if these other people drop the ball. And I'm just
Yes.
curious, and I'm throwing this at you from nowhere. I'm just curious kind of what your thoughts
Mm-hmm.
on that based on what you just said about trusting your colleagues.
Sure, and you're talking more from a manager. I mean, I'm not name bashing any news directors that I ever worked for, but I can say that I worked for a lot
Mm-hmm.
of different news directors. And a news director is the person who really is in charge of the newsroom. They're in charge of the final say in really what airs, who covers what direction a story may go. They're the boss essentially of the newsroom. And I worked for several, and I will say it was the ones who did trust, first of all, their hires, the ones who
Mm-hmm.
who could say, okay, well, I hired this person, I better trust them. It was the ones who trusted their teams to work together and who really trusted every position, trusted the assignment editors not to miss a story or to make the right call about whether to divert a crew, to trust the producer about whether they were choosing the right story to lead with. The ones who trusted people were the best managers
Mm-hmm.
because they knew, okay, this is the group I can trust. So I'm going to let them run with it instead of getting in the weeds and getting so involved in each word of how a script was phrased.
Hmm.
when that wasn't, their job was really to mold us and grow us instead of getting so micromanaged in the words. And those were the managers in news anyway that were the easiest to work with, and that we all seem to grow the most under.
Yeah, and I think that translates to pretty much any industry. It's what the guys say. You and I both talk about, like, if it's not perfect, it's okay. That freedom to
Mm-hmm.
fail, give yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But I think as a manager or leader, it's what you're saying is like, give the people the chance to fail. Basically, like,
Yes. Right.
look, I'm gonna trust you now, not over and over again. It's not like, oh, I'm gonna trust you over. It's like, all right,
Right.
but so many leaders, managers, directors sort of presuppose failure. They're like, well, I want to
Mm-hmm.
make sure you don't fail, as opposed to, well, Christina, here's this kind of thing, and let me know what you'd help, like,
Yeah.
give guidance, but hey, if you mess it up, that's part of the learning process. So,
Mm-hmm.
okay, we've talked a lot about that,
Okay.
the mindset piece. I don't want to make sure we have time to talk about
Mm-hmm.
a little bit tactical stuff as well. Uh, so you're sort of, we have the mindset, but then you go into kind of how to frame communication. And I talk specifically about change, and I think communication is doubly important in times of change and
Mm-hmm.
crisis. Though I'm not a crisis speaker, but you've got a catchphrase,
Yeah.
I guess, for lack of a better term, about being clear, concise, and confident.
Mm-hmm.
Which I'm
Yeah,
assuming, is that your framework, or is that just is that what you call your
it's the
framework?
overall framework. It's the overall framework, and any mini sub frameworks go
Well,
in there.
sure.
But overall, yes, you have to be clear in your communication. Getting clear means knowing who you're talking to, know your audience, and know your why. You have presentation skills background, so this is familiar to you, but really getting very clear on who you're talking to, why you're talking to. That's the clear. The concise is some of the frameworks about how you get to the point, how you, to use news terms, don't bury the lead, give us the
Mm-hmm.
headline. That's the concise. And the confident comes when you're clear and concise, and a bit of the delivery dynamics thrown in there as well. So really, if you can be clear, concise, that makes you confident, and that makes you an effective communicator in the workplace.
Well, I'm curious about how you. I want to dig in a little bit how you work with groups, because
Yeah.
I've done some presentation skills trading. I mean, I feel like
Yeah.
every professional speaker at some point in their life
Sure.
has taught a class,
Mm-hmm.
but
Some
I've
of us
only
like
ever
it
done
more
it
than
in a.
others.
What's that?
Some of us like it more than others, and that becomes our lane, and we
And
love
and
it.
that's great, because there's a need for it. There's a huge need for it.
Mm-hmm. Oh my
Um,
gosh, there's
but
certainly
whenever
is.
I've done it, it's always been half day, full day workshops. You get really into the
Mm-hmm.
weeds. You get people talking. But you do a lot of keynote speaking.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious, like, when you're doing a keynote, how do you distill down relevant message on a topic that usually takes a long time for a lot of people to convey, in a way that the people can walk out of the room taking some action?
Mm-hmm. It really boils down to that must know, should know, could know, must know, could know, should know. Like, I would love to have 8 hours with every single audience and group that I get to work with. I would love to dive into the nitty and gritty, but to your point, sometimes it's a 45, 50-minute keynote, and you've got
Mm-hmm.
to bang, bang, bang. That's where I have to be clear, concise, and confident. Uh, One thing I do, though, is I look at it, I've started calling them key shops more than keynotes, because
Mm-hmm.
me standing up there, which is a mashup for keynote and
Sure.
workshop, I'm key shopping, because me standing up there and talking about here's how to speak effectively for 55 minutes, sure, I can model it and I can teach them, but there still need to be opportunities for even large keynote groups, even if you have a group of 1,000 people, to practice it themselves in the moment. So even keynotes are a mix of that workshop, let's take a quick 5-minute break with a partner table. However, certain groups
Yeah.
don't like table work. However, you know the audience well enough to work it, but really getting that interaction as well. Whether it's calling somebody up on stage or again having them work and getting it out of their mouth on the spot, not just here, let me push everything I know about communication out at you for 55 minutes. And then from the response you get from that, it really tailors how deep you go in certain subjects.
Mm-hmm. All right, so let's come up with a hypothetical here. Let's say you got someone
Sure.
listening right now who's a corporate leader. They're
Mm-hmm.
going through a change. Let's
Yeah.
say AI is the big change the world is going through right now, and they're like, all right, we're going to start using more AI. And they've got this weekly meeting with their staff, their 50, 100 people, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
their organization. What, and I understand this is a broad question, but like hypothetically, if you were sitting with this person, you had a few minutes to chat with them, what would you recommend they do to kind of make the most of that time in their message?
focusing before we even get to the how are you concise, how are you saying this, how are you going to deliver this confidently with your delivery dynamics, that specific situation needs a very, very, very clear purpose. What is their purpose? Is it to tell their employees, hey, this is what we're doing, get on board? Is it to surface like questions and hesitation? Is it to motivate them? Is it to encourage them that this is the way to go? So it's really being clear about that purpose, because if that leader doesn't go into that conversation knowing that, they're going to get overrun real fast. They're going to get pushed back, or the message isn't going to land. So in that particular thing, I would say, how could you sum up how you want them to think, feel, do when they leave? Like, what is that one sentence? And then going back to the who, getting really, really clear on, obviously they know who's in the audience, right? It's their team, their employee, but what are their specific objections? What do they care about? What wakes them up at night thinking about AI? And then connecting those two.
Okay, no, I love that, and it's funny when I do the quick thinking type workshops. It's very similar. Like someone asks you a question, it's you got to like take that quick second to think about like what's my answer, right? Which sounds obvious, but so many people don't think about that. It's like something pops in their head, like, well, let me start rambling, but kind of taking that moment to think. And I guess that's the clear part of the clear, concise, and confident.
Right. It's not the title of the meeting. That's not what the purpose is.
Yeah.
It's
or the beautiful PowerPoint slides that look nice.
Yes. It's not that.
Real quick, a little side note, talking about your framework. You mentioned an email to me that your children are now old enough to use your framework against you.
Yes. Like, when did this happen? My kids are 9 and 11, and really it's my daughter, the older one, who is she gravitates towards words as well, and she's really from a young age, she was a very early talker. She's always been a communicator, and she's now old enough that the frameworks I teach, like I'll be working with a client all day. I come home and she does the same framework. For example, there's what flip the script. There's lots of people teach this, different variations. There's reverse reveal, flip the script, but it's the idea of taking what somebody is saying when they're giving you a no and turning it around into the reason you should do something. Like, you tell me no and I say yes, that's actually exactly why. So for example, my daughter did this to me when we recently got back from vacation. We love Cape May in New Jersey. It's our family's happy place. We got back and my daughter said, we need to go back at the end of the summer. We need to go back. And I had to say, honey, like, we have so much going on. You're getting back into, cheer, and daddy's work is busy, and I'm traveling again, and your brother's doing who knows what. Like, we're so busy. I don't think we have time. Well, she pulled the framework on me about reverse reveal, flipped the script, and said, Mom, I know we're busy. That's exactly why we should make time together to go on a family vacation and connect. So it's just funny when you can see how even at such a young age, some of these communication strategies and principles are effective. Because what was I supposed to say to that, Avish? Like, no, we don't need time as a family, even though we're busy.
Yeah,
like,
that's smart. Well, whether you're doing it overtly or not, you're training her well.
And I'm like, oh man, working against me now.
Yeah, it's funny. I don't know. And I haven't talked much with about my business. My kids are 11 and 7 and 3, but like the 11-year-old, I've never really fully explained the yes and yes but thing, so he has not yet thrown that back in my face.
Okay.
I'm sure I say this all the time. Like, in a professional environment, I'm great about stepping back and saying yes and.
Right.
But when we talk about home life, it's gonna be like yeah but. So
yeah, exactly. Right.
Pretty soon.
Glad there are cameras in our houses, right?
Yeah, he's gonna start throwing in my face. All right, a couple quick, semi-unrelated, but just you've had so many interesting experiences that you mentioned that I wanted to just ask about, just if nothing else, out of curiosity, and maybe see if some of these ideas fit into there. But if not,
let's go.
So you mentioned that you were the Jerry Sandusky trial. You're the only reporter who was there for every minute of the court, transcribed court proceedings.
Yes, I mean, there were hundreds of reporters covered that case. I was the only one from start to finish, every minute. And as context, the Sandusky case, as we know it, was Jerry Sandusky, who is now in prison for all sorts of horrible sex crimes against boys in the Penn State campus scene. And for anybody who follows Big Ten football, or specifically anybody in central Pennsylvania, I mean, that was a huge story when it happened, huge. And it spanned, the whole trial spanned months. The actual testimony was relatively short considering the nature of the trial. It was a couple of weeks, but yes, every single moment in there heard every witness, every cross-examination, sat probably 3 rows behind Sandusky, sometimes 2 rows. It was right there when he walked past us every morning, saw his wife Dottie. It was one of those cases that you had to be fully invested in. Like a lot of times in news, one of the good parts about it is you compartmentalize it. You go to work, you have a story for one day, 6:30 p.m. that story's gone, you never see it again. That was a different case because it was so long and constantly unfolding.
So I'm just curious, was it were you assigned to that, or did you sort of raise your hand and say, I want to do this, I want to be on this case?
I think I lobbied for that one pretty hard. I think I said I would work 5 Saturdays in a row. I'm sure I made some ridiculous offer, but I knew I wanted that one because again, it just kept unfolding and unfolding, and
Yeah,
there was something new every day.
that's. I was always curious about that because, I love courtroom dramas, but my belief, having managed to avoid jury duty for my whole life so far, I feel like it'd be really boring, and I'm just wondering, like, is it not? Is like the witness? Is it fascinating, or are you ever like interviewing or talking, reporting a story where you're like, this is really boring? And if so, like, how do you maintain your focus and how do you find the interesting elements in the boredom?
Well, there were certainly stories that were boring. Certainly, I mean, you're talking minimal tax increments you have to report on, and how do you make that interesting? That's separate. If we stick with the court cases first, I'm your polar opposite here. I think we have a lot in common, Avish, but I'm your polar opposite with jury duty. Like, I want jury duty so badly because I love being in a courtroom. Yes, sometimes the testimony gets really wordy and all that, but that's when you turn around. That's when the story isn't what's happening at the front of the courtroom. That's when you turn around and you take a look at the family members. How are they handling things? That's when you take the time to really study the subject, the defendant. What are they doing? What habits are they showing? What tics do they have? How much are they conferring with their attorney? What are people saying in the back of the courtroom? So there is always something that's interesting in a courtroom, even if it's a really, really long trial. It's about just recentering where your focus is. So I do know that's not the norm. I know a lot of people would
No, that's great. I love that answer. And
gladly avoid jury duty, but for me, I love being in a courtroom and watching everything that's going on.
Well, I love that. So, so not to self promote too much, but my book, I created a framework out of the phrase yes and. It's an acronym, but the D is for dig deeper, and I feel like that ties in it. And I didn't even think about applying in that scenario, but it's like when you are losing interest or feeling bored or stressed, or I think the natural response is to sort of self-soothe and distract yourself and pull out your phone, but what you're saying, and with the dig deeper is like, no, get curious then, like, and all right, fine, that's boring. Well, what else is there that I can get curious about in my environment? I think that's such a powerful reframe, not just in court, but in really any environment.
Anything corporate. Yes. Like, you're tired of a project. Okay, well, what are other people thinking about it? Like, this is how I'm seeing it because I've been knee deep in this or neck deep in this for weeks, but let's take a look at what the outside is looking at this and what's similar. It's getting curious. And
now,
again, more news.
To be fair, you've got 20 years experience. Your whole job was being curious, right? You had to like pay attention, ask questions, but it's definitely a lesson all of us can take. And like, it's getting away from surface level. I think that also helps, like, in terms of rapport and understanding. It probably made you a much better interviewer when you were willing to, and reporter when you were willing to dig deeper versus just, all right, here's what's going on at the top. Let me not bother looking any further than the surface.
Yeah.
All right,
flipping the camera. Oops.
No, go ahead. Good.
I was going to say it's the idea of flipping the camera around. How many times have you seen video of a house fire? I mean, they're horrible. It always pulls at your heart a little bit. But what's more effective? When that camera is turned around and you see the video of people who are in shock watching it. That's more effective. It's that idea of turning the camera around, looking outside of for a work example, just the project you're looking on or the change that's happening and looking at the environment around it.
It's funny. I don't do nearly enough, but even not in a tragic situation like that, I do try. Like I go
Mm-hmm.
for walks, and every so often, I get in this mental frame where I like to see cars driving by, and you see the person driving the car, and I just pause and ask, like, oh, I wonder what their story is. Like,
Mm-hmm.
they're not doing anything interesting. It's not like, oh, there's someone driving down the street shirtless with a cowboy hat on. Like, it's just a random person probably driving to work, and I'm like, I don't do it enough, but I think it's kind of that thing, like just connecting as people and kind of building that sense of curiosity.
Curious.
That is. All right, there's probably other stories here, but we're kind of coming to the end of the time. We did talk about the Baltimore thing, so. Oh, wait a second. All right, I just want to touch upon, speaking of tragedy, so you were there reporting during the Virginia Tech shooting as well?
Yes, the I was anchoring during that time, and
Mm-hmm.
anchoring is when you're in the set,
Yeah.
on the set. You've got all the lights and the camera crew, and well, you always have a camera crew, but you've got the teleprompter and producers in your ear really guiding you a script, and then there's in the field, which is when you're out on the scene. And for that, I was anchoring. The script kind of goes out the window at that point
Yeah.
because that was wall to wall coverage. And Virginia Tech is in the neighboring town to Charlottesville, Virginia. University of Virginia is in Charlottesville, and Virginia Tech is in Blacksburg. So lots of families in Charlottesville had students at Virginia Tech, and it was just they were so closely related that it felt like a local story to us
Yeah.
too. It really was. But that was several hours on the set and trying to get that news and decipher it, knowing some people in your audience might still not have heard from people. Some are watching strictly out of curiosity. Some are watching because their loved ones are first responders who are there on scene and witnessing horrific things. And that story also just the importance of being accurate, and not speculating and in making sure everything you're saying is 100% accurate, because people are living for that news at that moment. Select audience, certain people in your audience. That was a hard one. That was a really hard one.
Yeah, and that I would assume they're probably like this like weight of responsibility in that, like you're saying, like because people are getting their news from you,
Sure.
and because they're not on
Sure.
site, and so
Sure.
do you like feel you have to compartmentalize there, or like just be able to like, all right, like this is this horrific tragic thing, but I just got to focus, kind of like I got to focus on my next step and not let myself drown in
Exactly.
thinking about that.
Exactly. And a lot of, again, I never want to speak for all reporters, but many of my colleagues are my best friends still to this day, even if we don't work together. And so we had enough of similar habits that I feel safe saying one way we do that is in that moment, we're so focused. We can't think about the emotions of it. We can't think about, to get horribly, disturbing, and feel free to edit this out, but you can't think about the first responders who are walking through those classrooms and bodies are vibrating because their loved ones are calling their phones, but they can't answer them because they're dead. Like you can't let yourself go down that hole in a moment, or you'll lose it. You'll completely break down because you're human on air. So instead you get through it. And then at the end is when that's when you decompress with your colleagues.
Well, let's kind of start wrapping things up by pivoting off of the tragedy, but onto kind of, I think, the way that ties back. Well, I think this ties in.
Right.
It is that, we talked about if you're feeling unconfident as a speaker or presenter, but I think this whole idea, and you and I both talk about like that one step, or that just focusing on, if you focus on the enormity of your presentation or the dozens or hundreds of thousands of people, but if you just focus on what's my next, just as an example, when I first started, like many of us, that I went to Toastmasters, a little speaking organization, and for that reason, I'd have my speech well done, and like a minute before it was my turn to speak, I would immediately just forget exactly what I was supposed to say.
Which is common.
Yeah, it's common. And then, about 5 seconds before I'd remember, and that just sort of became a pattern. But what I turned that into a technique of, I just kept repeating and focusing on my opening sentence. Like, and that was like my one thing. It lowered my nerves because I'm focusing on something, and it was, and that's kind of what I recommend. It's like, look, you don't need the overwhelm, but just what's my next step? Focus on that, and that kind of shrinks your focus so you don't get overwhelmed. I'm just curious how that resonates with you in terms of like the work you've done with people speaking. and communicating.
Absolutely. That and again, it's funny, similar. Those first, behind in the moments before we go on for a keynote, I'm doing those first lines. I'm doing those first lines, and I'm also focusing on the end. I feel like a lot of the people I work with, they can start, but where they get really muddy is when they're trying to wrap up. So if you have a clear exit strategy and you know confidently how you're going to wrap up a message or a presentation, that helps those nerves all the way through. If you know this
Mm-hmm.
is how I'm going to end, you can be a bit slower with it. So I say rehearse that open, sure, and also that close. How are you wrapping up? How are you powerfully closing?
Love it. That is great. We're gonna finish up here in just a minute. I'm gonna ask like one final question before I
Sure.
get to that. For people who want to connect with you, learn more about
Mm-hmm.
you, hire you
Yeah.
to speak at their conference or workshop with their organization, what's the best ways to connect and reach out to you?
Sure, I'm on LinkedIn. Christina-Butler.com is my website where um, that goes straight to everything you need as far as contact information.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure people can also find me through your LinkedIn page as well because we're connected. I think there are a couple of Christina Butlers, but people could find
Well,
me through your
clearly someone's got ChristinaButler.com without the dash.
LinkedIn. So,
Yeah,
but people could find me through there as well.
yeah, and we'll put the links in in the show notes and stuff.
Yeah.
But if someone's like driving, and it's Christina-Butler.com.
Yep.
Fantastic. Well, hey, I'm gonna ask one kind of final question. I try to wrap up all
Yes.
of these with.
Let's do it.
It is, I talk about this idea of saying yes and instead of yes but because
Mm-hmm.
I think the world would be a better place if everyone just started with a default mindset of yes and. And I'm curious for you, what would be one small thing that you believe if everyone in the world did, it would make the world a better place?
The world entirely or the world of communication?
I go with the world entirely, but you can interpret the world of communication. So it could be
Okay,
related to what we talked
let's go.
about. It could be different. Just what's
Sure.
one small thing that I wish everyone could just do this one small thing.
And let's go back to a point we hit. And it is just continue to be curious. I hate to sound like Ted Lasso and take that line, but be curious. Just be curious about everything. Professionally, it helps you get clearer on what the vision is and what the goal is and what you're trying to communicate. And in real life, we know just be curious. Ask questions. That's why I ended up becoming a reporter. Ask
Mm-hmm.
questions from the time I was little. Ask questions. Be curious.
I
That's
love it.
mine.
That is a fantastic answer and a great way to wrap up. Christina, thank you so much for being on.
Thank
This
you.
was terrific. And everyone, if you're listening, or as you are listening, be sure to check out Christina-Butler.com and check out our LinkedIn, and I will link to all those in the show notes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Where's the stop here?